Would you kindly? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find? Would you kindly get this?
What is going on, everybody? I am here, Blackbot, and I am here with the long-awaited Metroid Dread review. So as you all know, the last 2D Metroid game in the timeline released in 2002, with Metroid Fusion, and 19 years later, 19 long years later, we finally get the sequel in Metroid 5 called Metroid Dread. But is it good? Does it hold up to the likes of Super Metroid, Metroid Fusion, Metroid Zero Mission? Is it even an improvement over Mercury Steam's prior game, their remake of Metroid 2, Samus Returns? Well, as a guy who owns and played pretty much every mainline Metroid game, including the fan-made AM2R, I'm going to let you know exactly how Metroid Dread stacks up. So the story is pretty basic. It makes sense, but it is a Metroid game, and it doesn't have all these cutscenes and dialogue like other M, thankfully. And it also isn't bogged down by extended scanning and lore like any of the Metroid Prime games, although I do wish it had the logbook update system from AM2R. So the story picks up right after Metroid Fusion, giving you the explanation for what the X-Parasites are, what Metroids are, and how Samus was infected by the X-Parasites at the start of Metroid Fusion on SR388. Since the Metroids were designed by the Chozo to be natural predators for the X-Parasites, Samus was given a Metroid vaccine by the remnants from the baby Metroids she saved in Metroid 2 that died at the hands of Mother Brain in the final fight in Super Metroid. So the game starts out with the Galactic Federation receiving an anonymous video transmission with the video showing an X-Parasite. We know how dangerous these things are. They can basically infect, copy, asexually produce, divide infinite number of times. They are the Flood on steroids, pretty much. The transmission is traced to a planet called Planet ZDR, and since the X-Parasites can once again absorb any organic life and practically are invincible to anything outside of Metroids, the Galactic Federation sends out 7 extra-planetary multiform mobile identifiers, or EMI for short, those little white robot things you saw in the Amiibo, things that chase you. Unfortunately, the Galactic Federation loses contact with the 7 EMIs, and since Samus is the only person immune to the X-Parasites due to the Metroid vaccine, she takes on the mission to investigate the planet. And she goes down there with their gunship alongside the AI Adam from Fusion. They descend down to the planet where Samus is promptly beaten and knocked out and defeated by a mysterious Chozo warrior. When she wakes up, as usual, she is stripped of all of her abilities and now dons a new green power suit that is halfway between her organic fusion suit and her standard power suit. The reason for this is her fusion suit, if anybody didn't know, is the organic layer under her power suit. So this kind of pseudo green organic suit is still her fusion suit trying to regenerate to her original appearance of the power suit. That's why you kind of see like organic veins and material on the current suit. Now I won't get into any spoilers, but this game does go into Samus' origin, as well as the Chozo and the Metroids in full, so it's pretty much like Sakamoto said, it is the end of an era, and it does fully explain pretty much everything for you. Now, let's get into the technical aspects of the game. 1600 by 900 in docked mode, 720p in portable mode, no anti-aliasing, as per usual with most Nintendo in-house games. Gameplay targets 60 frames per second, with 30 frames per second in the cutscenes. There are frame rate drops in certain areas. When gameplay can get too hectic, sometimes the frame rate will drop, but sometimes even on occasion when there's only one enemy on screen, in certain areas the frame rate can be kind of inconsistent. I don't know why. Fortunately, the dips are never really huge and they're not very detrimental to the gameplay at all. In most cases, I've never died to poor frame rate or was like, oh man, if the frame rate was better, I wouldn't have died, a la Demon Souls on the PS3 or something like that. The graphics, as with most Switch games, how do I explain this really? Okay, with most Switch games, I wish the game was on a different platform, a more powerful platform, a PlayStation, an Xbox, or preferably PC. Games like Xenoblade 2 I find completely unplayable on the Switch, and I'm even hearing people are complaining about Shin Megami Tensei 5 would have benefited greatly from better hardware, and thankfully it's going to be released hopefully on the PS4, PS5, and PC, but other people take more nefarious means to playing their Switch games. And we all know there's a certain crowd that likes to play their games via other means, but Metroid Dread won't make you feel that way, whether you play it on your TV or the handheld. This is not one of those games where I go, man, I wish I could play this on another platform. Metroid, a 2D game, right at home on the Switch. Plays great, looks great. Samus looks great, the enemies look great, the bosses look great, nothing in the game looks weird or out of place, everything is perfectly sized, Samus looks proportional, her arms don't look like they're coming out of her sockets like the suit in Metroid Prime. The environments on ZDR are definitely less varied than the other games. There's no environments like Talon Overworld, Fendara Drifts, Magmar Caverns, Brinstar, SR-388 Area 1. In fact, all in all, it never really felt like I was on a planet, much less I felt like I was on a space station like Metroid Fusion's BSL Biological Space Laboratories, except even less varied than an artificial space station, if that makes sense. The backgrounds and the backdrops and the environments are all nice and detailed. There's really no empty spaces or voids in the backgrounds and the backdrops, so overall I'm very happy with the graphics, and the only negative thing I can say is I don't like the weird, fuzzy, blurry fog type effect going on in the Emmy areas. And I understand why they did it, so you would know when you're in an Emmy area and when you're not in an Emmy area, so despite getting used to it after a short while, I can't help but think that they could have probably done something different. What that would be, I don't know. It works, so it is what it is. The audio, the music, the sound effects. The effects are good. The bombs, the beams, the missiles, and the melee counter, they're all nice. I just feel like the beams don't have a lot of impact. They don't feel heavy. They don't feel like they do damage. They just feel underwhelming compared to prior games, which is weird because in Mercury Steam's prior game, Return to Samus, I felt those beams had a lot more impact and were a lot more useful and honestly did more damage. The music, honestly, is the worst of any Metroid game, or the worst of any mainline Metroid game, and that includes even the original Metroid on the regular Nintendo, and even Metroid 2 Return to Samus on the Game Boy. The soundtrack fits the game's narrative, with the game being Dread, because that's exactly what the game sounds like. Dreadful, and not in a literal sense, but it literally has dreary and dreadful feel to the music. You feel a sense of dread and kind of powerless from the environment around you, and typically most Metroid games have, like upbeat, rock and all kinds of other music, they get you in the flow, they get the adrenaline pumping, but in this game, you really don't get that. And the fact that it makes you feel like you're in a dreadful place and powerless, it feels even more strange in later playthroughs because, as you know, once you play through a Metroid game, you know what to expect. Further playthroughs, you're speed running, you're just breezing through, blasting through everything, so the music then really doesn't fit with the game. There's no music in the game like Fendara Drifts, Magmar Caverns, Brinstar, SR-388 Area 1. There's nothing iconic in this game outside of like the get item or get power up, item chime jingle, whatever you want to call it. The sound effects are nothing really spectacular. They're acceptable for what the franchise has always been. I've kind of always preferred either Super Metroid or Metroid Prime sounds. I wasn't really a big fan of fusion sounds because, I don't know, games just sounded weird on the Game Boy Advance compared to the Super Nintendo to me. That's just me, my personal opinion. But this is a mix of them and then something different. It gets the job done, but once again, it's really nothing memorable or something people will remember long past their days. I mean, somebody could play the original title screen of Metroid or Zebes as soon as you drop down into the game, and like I can hum those themes. I know those themes like instantly. They'll pop right into my head. I couldn't tell you one theme in this game. I couldn't tell you one theme or identify any theme towards any area, and likewise, I couldn't even name you one area in this game because I don't think the areas were, I don't know, that cool or varied to be even memorable, really. The gameplay really carried this game, which, let's get into the gameplay. The gameplay in Metroid Dread is the best of any 2D Metroid game to date, plain and simple. While Mercury's theme's The Last Effort and Samus Returns was great, I felt like the 30 frames per second held it back and ultimately led to AM2R having the better remake of Metroid 2, unless you're honestly just a really big fan of the returning melee counter. But here in Metroid Dread, Samus moves effortlessly and responsively at a smooth 60 frames per second. Not what these Xbox and console fanboys of old used to say, a smooth 30. There is no such thing as a smooth 30. This is a smooth 60. Now, the mobility of Samus in this game is absolutely incredible. The default addition of the slide is one of the best new additions to the game, whether it's running and sliding under obstacles, avoiding enemy fire, or escaping the enemy in the chase sequences. You don't even get the morph ball into a pretty decent portion of the game. You're really using the run and slide. Wall jumping, double jumps, the grapple beam, and the Metroid fusion ability to hang and crawl up ledges make transversing the world super fun and easy. You also have the spider magnet to climb up walls. I'm not a really big fan of the spider magnet, to be honest. I would much rather have preferred the spider ball from Metroid 2, but that was in their last game, so I guess they wanted to try something different. I don't know. And also, because the spider magnet surfaces you can climb up and down, you can hit them with the grapple beam. You probably can't use the grapple beam. Actually, you can't use the grapple beam in morph ball mode, so they just made it so you can climb with your hands and your feet. Whatever. Big deal. Not a big problem. So, not only that, you get the flash shift for quick evasion and the speed boost with all of its Shine Spark shenanigans. And I've seen online people doing insane stuff with the Shine Spark. My favorite new ability obviously has to be the flash shift, which lets you do 2 dashes, whether on the ground or in the air, and it's pretty much able to allow you to avoid and evade things, especially in boss encounters, and it definitely allows you to transverse the world at a much quicker rate. With the flash shift and sliding, Samus just pretty much glides past and glides through anything as long as you're good enough and accurate enough to control her. There are a good amount of beams to find throughout Planet ZDR, though honestly, I don't think standard beams are strong enough or impactful enough in this game. Unless you're using the melee counter and killing something with the beam right after a melee counter, it almost feels like if you're not using the charge shot, the standard beam is pretty much useless. That's my opinion. Like, very few enemies I would ever waste my time just to shoot and not use a charge beam. You might as well just use missiles. And as far as missiles go, there's no selection of missiles. So you don't get missiles and then super missiles. You don't get missiles for 1, super missiles for 5. Once you find the super missile upgrade, they replace the regular missiles entirely. So there's no going back and forward. You get missile, you get super missile. Once you get super missile, regular missile, gone. Now, one of the newer additions to the game, the storm missile, is a very welcome addition. It allows you to charge up the missile. You can lock on to 5 different targets, or just lock on to one target Or before you even lock on, you can just shoot it. And it can lock on and shoot up to 5 individual missiles, all at one target, or 5 individual targets, or even 2, 3, 4, any combination. It's pretty damn sick with the free aim. The free aim, though, I will say this with the free aim. I remapped to use L2 for free aim. I do not know why they had L1 for free aim. I would rather hold down the bigger button, but hey, that's just me. Now, one of the other newer additions to the game is the Phantom Cloak, which allows you to become a slow-moving Samus, but also makes you invisible. And I didn't find it very useful outside of enemy encounters. I mean, there's some doors that have motion sensors that you need to use to get by, but outside of any enemy encounter, I never used it. If there was a boss fight where you needed to use it, I never found one. And honestly, the reality is this. Even though you can use it against the enemies and enemy encounters, I just found it more effective to just keep moving fast and run. It is what it is. And as I said before, the second brand new upgrade is the Flash Shift, which is a horizontal dash that can be used in the air or on the ground up to 2 times consecutively. Again, this is probably the move you're going to be using the most in the game, as it allows you to quickly traverse the world, and it's a very variable, valuable asset in boss fights and traversing the world. You will probably use this ability more than any other ability in the game. Speaking of boss fights, they are all very enjoyable. There's not any bad boss fights. I had a lot of fun with every boss fight, and they provide each in their own individual challenge, requiring you to use all your little individual abilities. So it is what it is. Just like all the Metroid games, you get new abilities to fight new bosses, and you're constantly expanding your arsenal and able to use them to accomplish more difficult feats. Now, Metroid has never been a difficult game or a difficult series, but I will say this is probably the hardest Metroid game. And through my first playthrough, I'd have to say I died a good amount of time on the bosses. But ironically, this isn't the case in any subsequent playthrough, as once you figure out the bosses, they are pretty much complete pushovers. My second playthrough, I did not die to any bosses one time. Navigating the world is pretty easy as long as you don't go off the beaten path. The game allows you to explore, but generally leads you towards the right direction. So if you want to explore, be sure to place a mark on the last power-up you acquired, because wherever you acquire your last power-up means you're not too far from where you need to be. I honestly don't know how people have trouble navigating this game like David Jaffe did, as the game is literally, and I mean literally, designed so you're not going to get lost. Check out Boss Key's video titled "Why You Probably Didn't Get Lost in Metroid Dread" if you want further clarification. I don't know what's going on with David Jaffe. Maybe he's getting old. Maybe he was never a good gamer. Maybe he was a one-hit wonder. Could be any combination of them. Maybe he just never played a Metroid game. I don't know. But the game is literally designed so you don't and can't get lost. Now, the main gimmick of the Metroid Dread game is the Emmy. These are the robots that the Galactic Federation sent down the planet ZDR to investigate, and for reasons I won't spoil, they go rogue. Go figure. Now, the Emmy patrol specific locations throughout ZDR. These are those fuzzy, blurry locations. I said I wish I had a different effect because, you know, when you walk into one of these locations, it's all fuzzy and blurry, and it makes like this weird sound, and there's no music, and if they see you or detect you, like the Metal Gear Solid alarm goes off and you have to run. So if they detect you on their scanners, they will chase you down, and if they catch you, they will impale you right to the chest, and it's an instant death. You have 2 chances to avoid with the melee counter: once before they grab you, and another time after they grab you before they impale you. The timing to counter them, you might as well be Daigo, trying to parry Justin Wong, because it is very hard to parry these things. I mean, if you're in the... Well, I don't want to spoil that part, but yes, it is very hard to parry them. I'll just say that. This is why the game is probably titled Dread, because the Emmys make the game dreadful. You will be running from them like Nemesis or the Tyrant in Resident Evil 2. They will chase you. And they even have abilities. And they are invincible. Invincible death machines that will chase you until they either catch you or you lose them or you leave their patrol zone. But as you progress through the game, enemies will even have special abilities. They can freeze you. They can electrocute you. They do wild crap. So you got to use all of your abilities to escape them, dodge them, outrun them, avoid them. You can use the Phantom Cloak to even avoid detection. So you do have the abilities and you do have the tools to make the chase fun, to make things interesting. And then to kill them, well, I don't want to spoil that either, but you'll find out early on in the game. So overall, I found everything about the gameplay to be excellent outside of the regular usage of beam weapons. That I found, underwhelming. Honestly, like I said prior, if you're not using charge shots, hell, you might as well be using missiles, because your standard beam weapon, no matter how many times it's upgraded, even when it's at the final upgrade, I just don't think that it's powerful enough unless you charge it up. So final thoughts on this game. Final thoughts. It's a must-have for any Metroid game. A must-have for any Metroid fan. And honestly, it is a legit bona fide Game of the Year contender in my eyes. It's a solid 8-hour game, and that is already promoting tons of speed running online. So yeah, you can play the game multiple times. It's got a hard mode. You know, people are already online trying to compete, find sequence breaking, so you can beat the fastest. You know how these kind of games go. And for anyone complaining about its $60 price tag, you're more than welcome to go spend $70 on something else like Call of Duty, FIFA, Madden, 2K. If that's what you want to do, go for it. Do that instead. But if you want to play something different, and something a lot of us have been waiting for over 19 years to play, then I think your money would be better spent on Metroid Dread.